Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm here with the Poker Coaching Challenge for October 2019. So let's get to it. Let's get to it. All right. So let's take a look at this situation. This is one that gave some of you problems, which is fine and good. And essentially the question is, how do you play a tight range by the turn and river? And that is sometimes difficult, sometimes not. You have to be very, very aware that your range is very, very tight by the river, or small by the river. So you have to make sure that you have, well, if you want to be value betting, you also have some bluffs. And this is a spot where we are going to have some nut hands on the river, so we definitely need to have some bluffs. So let's just go ahead and take a look. In a $500 tournament against competent opponents, with 50 big blind effective stacks, the low jack raises to 2.5 big blinds, and everyone folds you on the button. What is your strategy? So this is roughly the GTO strategy, and you may opt to be a little looser or a little tighter, depending on the players yet to act. Now, this is straight from the 40 big blind chart on PokerCoaching.com. You can find that under the tool section. But that's not the strategy I would use. Notice how this strategy I would use is just a little bit tighter. And the reason is because, first off, we're facing a 2.5 big blind raise instead of a 2 big blind raise, okay? That alone forces you to be a little bit tighter. The charts, I believe, use are when you're facing a 2 big blind raise. Also, in general, people tend to raise good cards from the low jack seat. And I want to avoid that. I think most people open from earlier positions a little bit too tight. So that means I should be a little bit tighter when facing them. And also in tournaments, you usually want to shy away from marginal spots. And we're going to see this because some of you have been asking me to compare my plays to the GTO ranges. And we'll see a few differences where I think it's highly beneficial to deviate from GTO. And if you're playing just straight GTO, you're probably leaving a whole lot of money on the table because we are playing a poker tournament. And in poker tournaments, you have to be a little bit more cautious, especially with the marginal spots, because if you lose one big hand, you're out of the tournament, right? Which is why very often you will see me in tournaments doing a decent amount more checking in scenarios. So anyway, this is my pre-flop range, and this is what I do for the most part in regular poker, right? I mean, I'm not trying to make up an answer or anything. I'm trying to give you exactly what I am doing and why I'm doing it, and I think this is pretty nice. You can see our blocker bluffs are here. These are all just nice blocker bluffs. We have a few suited connected hands as bluffs, and that's about it. We could use some, I say suited connectors, suited aces. We could use some suited connectors down here if we felt like it. I'm not like opposed to that. I think that'd be reasonable. Stuff like Jack 8 suited would be fine. Queen 8 suited could be fine. Queen 9 suited, Jack 9 suited, 10 8 suited, 9 7 suited. All those could be fine to 3-bet if you wanted. In reality, you probably want to mix it up. But this is roughly what I'm doing. So let's assume my default preflop strategy, the one I actually use. Suppose we 3-bet to 7.5 big blinds and the low jack calls. All right, flop comes 9, 5, 3, and the low jack checks. What is your strategy? So let's just naturally break it down, right? That's what you always want to do. Naturally break it down. Premium made, draw, marginal made, junk. And you'll see here that we have way too few draws. Right? So given we have way too few draws, that already is going to make us recognize we probably have a bit of a range advantage, assuming marginal made to junk has way too many marginal made hands to junk, and sure enough it does. So whenever you see this pattern occur, if you run your range against your opponent's range on most uncoordinated boards, you're going to have a pretty decent range advantage. So when you have a pretty decent range advantage, you're going to want to be betting about 100% of your range using a small size. Some of you said that this flop misses me, whereas my opponent has maybe sets of 5s and 3s. And that's true, but also look, aces, kings, queens, jacks. That right there is just like pure power. 24 combinations of just nuts. And notice that we have, that makes up about, 25 or 30% of our range, right? So the fact that we have so many just obviously strong hands here, and a lot of our quote-unquote bluffs, ace, king, ace 10, king, jack, queen, jack, ace X suited, right? All these hands get there some portion of the time. What I call a little more in position if the low jack had a looser range, I'd probably just be playing closer to GTO strategy. I'm not going to be like flat calling with stuff like Queen 10 offsuit or Jack 10 offsuit ever. Like I'm always 3-betting those are folding. And you see really like this range is not all that different. This is what 24% of hands GTO suggests, and I'm playing 21. So it's a mild adjustment, right? If I'm going to be playing more hands, though, I'm usually going to do that by adding in more suited hands and then 3-betting roughly the same number of combinations of the big offsuit hands. You see here it's basically the same. Slightly different, but close to the same. Obviously, when you're 3-betting 3 big offsuit hands, there's 12 of each of these. So removing one takes away like a very solid chunk of your potential bluffs. But I think this is fine. Also, we're playing 40 big blinds deep. We're not playing 50 big blinds deep. This is a 40 big blind chart. We don't have a 50 big blind chart on the site yet. And in general, you just want to have hands that make better made hands. Well, I guess it doesn't matter all that much. What it amounts to is you can kind of do whatever you want within reason. And if you're going to tighten this range, as I think you probably should in tournaments against most reasonable low jack opponents, I think this is very nice. So anyway, on the flop, when we naturally break this down, notice we have too many premium hands and too many marginal made hands. These are the two strong portions of our range, right? So when the two strong portions of your range make up a much larger percentage of your total range than they should, remember we should have something like 1 premium hand to 2 bluffs. Here it's like 1 to 1.2. And then we should have something like 70% marginal made to 30% junk, but here it's 80-20, right? So both of those favor the stronger versions, and that's usually going to lead us to having a range advantage if you just run our range against most opponents' ranges from out of position in this spot, so we can bet small with everything. Why is ace-king considered a marginal made hand on 9-5-3? Because if I checked with ace-king on the flop, which is what I would have often done, if my opponent bets the turn, I'm not folding. Something I noticed some of you doing as well is you are just being way too nitty after the flop. Is if you assume that when he calls your 3-bet, when your opponent calls your 3-bet, they just have to have the nuts. And that's certainly not true. If you do 3-bet ace-king pre-flop and it comes 9-5-3 and your opponent checks and you decide to check for some reason, which I don't think is ideal, but if you do check, the plan is definitely not to fold to a turn bet. Your ace-high beats all your opponent's bluffs. Why is ace-queen junk and not ace-10? Ace-queen's not even in my range. Ace-queen was folded pre-flop. Let's go back over here. It was called pre-flop, so it's not in our range, right? We see ace-queen here. Ace-queen was called, so we no longer have it. Queen 10 suited, not going to be in this range because we called it, right? If you called, it means that you did not 3-bet. And within this question, suppose we 3-bet. What about betting ace 10 suited with the backdoor draw? Ace of spades 10. Sure. I mean, look, again, I want to make this very clear, everyone. I'm betting all of these. Don't stop acting like I'm checking. I don't know why you all think I'm checking. I realize it says check here, but look, read right here. Read this. Read this. It's important to read, right? Betting with 100% of your range is probably ideal, which is what I would do in this scenario every single time. When you 3-bet pre-flop and you have a big range advantage and the board is very uncoordinated, you want to be betting very frequently. If you do not have a range advantage or usually when the board is very coordinated, actually if you just don't have a range advantage and the board is very coordinated, you want to be way more inclined to check. But this is a board, 9-5-3. It's about as dry as they come. We're going to be betting this every time small. All right, on the turn. Suppose we bet small and the opponent calls, which is great. Remember, pot was 16 big blinds or so, right? So we bet only a third pot, which is what I said we should do. Turn is a king, low jack checks. What is our strategy now? So let's take a look at the natural breakdown. We want ideally 1 draw or less to 1 premium made hand, so 50-50 or fewer draws, which is fine. We want that 70-30 mix of marginal made hands and junk. And you see this time, it breaks down pretty nicely, right? That we have exactly the numbers we want from marginal made to junk. And we have too few bluffs, but like whatever, it's not that big of a deal. So let's take a look at this. So notice that we have aces, kings, ace, king, and king, jack value betting. That makes a lot of logical sense. We have queen 10, jack 10. I'm sorry, queens, jacks, king 8 suited for top pair, and ace 3 suited for bottom pair checking, which makes a lot of sense. We have hands in green, also ace-10 offsuit. So I say right here, ace-10 and ace-3 may end up being junk on rivers. So this may not be quite as nice as it initially appears, but it's still like, fine enough. Which hands are considered junk here? There are 9 of them. Takes a little bit of practice to see them, but it's ace-7, ace-6, ace-4 of diamonds, clubs, and hearts. Because remember, we bet everything on the flop, right? There are 9 combinations, 3 of each of those. So ace-7, ace-6, ace-2 without a backdoor flush draw. So those are ones that are considered junk in this scenario. When you use the range analyzer, you use the adjust feature. There's a video for that in the range analyzer, so you can go and study with that. I'm not going to go through a full tutorial on how to use it, but here it is. Would you not bet the turn to see how honest the villain is? Most players auto-call flop right now. Right? No, most players do not auto-call the flop. If they're sitting there with nothing, they're just going to fold. A lot of people fold, and they should fold. Like if you're sitting there with Jack-10 suited on 9-5-3, if you don't have a backdoor flush draw, you should probably be folding, even with the overcard. Now, if they're going to call you with Jack-high, think about this. Do you really want them folding? I mean, no, right? Because they're in marginal shape. So, against Jack-high, take a look. All these hands in green beat Jack-high, which is why I just suggested checking it behind and then calling any river bet, right? So, again, ace-10 and ace-3 may not quite be green. They may be more like gray, in which case maybe you want to check a few more premium hands, right? Anytime you see that maybe your green to gray range is out of whack, the first suggestion is either take some junks, add them to bluffs or to draws, or take some premium hands, which we have too many of here, and add them to marginal made. So, obviously, hand to check here would be king-jack. That would clear it up. That said, I'm probably just going to use this strategy. And it's nice because this one's actually really, really intuitive. Which range software is this? This is our range analyzer. It is part of PokerCoaching.com. It's under the tools section. This is what every student, at least the vast majority of students, use to input their homework answer. It allows you to visualize a range. So I thought this spot was pretty easy. All right, so now on the river, here we are. We bet 10 big blinds. The opponent calls. River is a 2 of spades. So spades comes in. And the opponent checks. What size do you use on the turn? It says right here, 10 big blinds, and the opponent calls, right? Remember, we have to do a little bit of reading in this. I mean, I think I even just said it. So in this scenario, you have to ask, is ace-king good enough to value bet? Top pair, top kicker. When the third spade comes. Take a second. Think about it. Right? Try to figure it out. Next, if ace-king is not, what about aces? What about kings? Okay? So, a few things you want to be asking yourself in this scenario. Where, basically, would your opponent lead with a flush? Some opponents will just like always lead with a flush. Some will not. If they'll always lead with a flush, then when they check, you know they have, well, top pair or worse for the most part, which is great for you. If you think they will check with flushes, or if for some reason you think the range is very weighted towards flushes, then you should be more inclined to check behind with your non-flush hands, right? If you think that is what your opponent's doing. Will your opponent call a river bet with top pair? Some will, some won't. Some will fold out top pair to a river bet. If they're going to fold out top pair to a river bet, well, then there's no point in value betting aces and ace-king, right? Because they're just going to fold whenever you beat them. So you want to ask yourself that. Can you go all in for pot with this range? Take a second, think about it. And you may not want to bet all the ace-king or queen-jack without spades, right? So in this scenario, we are jamming for about half pot, which means we get to have about 25% bluffs if we're going all in based on the pot size. And in this scenario, we have too many bluffs, which is why I say right here that you may not want to be betting all of these ace-kings and or queen-jacks. And you probably should cut down on queen-jacks, maybe make it to like 9 combinations or something like that. If you're holding the king X with a king of spades, you may bet. Well, we don't have any king X with a king of spades besides king jack, and there's no point in betting king jack as a bluff, right? So I'm not sure what you're saying here, Adam. Is queen jack offsuit our bluff just as a function of it being the only one left over? And in this situation it is, because we don't have any other ones, right? Also, I mean, I don't think the queen, that really is it right here. We just have no other options given the way this is played out. That's really what it amounts to. Shouldn't the number of draws equal the number of premium hands on the turn? That is on the turn, you can have at most one premium made hand to one, at most one draw to one premium made hand. So you can have fewer draws, but you don't want to have more. On all of the draw to premium made hand numbers, that's the maximum amount of draws you can hand. Having less is okay. And yeah, like I discussed, I guess it's ST. The reason we are using the queen jack here is just because our range is very narrow. We have to use what we have to give us a reasonable answer, and that's what we have here. Idea says, this is your first live webinar. You used to be minus 15 big blinds per 100. You bought a few of my products, and now you're winning. Well, good. How much fewer draws do I have ideally? Well, like I just said here, we could maybe go down to like 9 combinations of draws, and that would probably be fine. That's going to give us some give-ups, which is a little bit not ideal. Because, like, look, in the real world, you really don't want to be just like checking behind queen high and giving up. It's not what you want to be doing. If at all possible, if you think you can perhaps overvalue or get your opponent to fold out stuff like top pair, which I actually do think happens here a lot. Some players with a hand like king, queen of clubs, they'll just find a fold. If they are going to, if they're going to fold to a jam, you definitely want to just be bluffing all your potential bluffs. So I don't really mind over bluffing here a little bit. There's no ace two of spades, says Ronald, which is quite nice because you know what? The range analyzer accounts for that. It already counted it here. Count the combinations, you'll see. The nice thing about the range analyzer is you can just straight go through on the turn, remove all of the hands that were played differently. We bet, right? So that means we remove all the hands in green, take all those to the river, give them new colors, and it accounts for the fact that ace two of spades is not available. Now, I suppose you can remove it on your end if you'd like, but there's no requirement to do that. Like you could go through and remove like every hand with the king of hearts in it, right? You could go through and select those if you felt like it, but it wouldn't change any of the numbers. So there's no need to do that. We designed the range analyzer so that you would not have to worry with that. I mean, it's obvious to tell that it is not here in this exact example, but there are many, many other spots where you have like ace king with the king of hearts. Now we'd have to go through and select which ace kings are still in. That just becomes very tedious and unnecessary. Do you really have any fold equity versus top pair with a half pot bet? Look at what we're value betting with on the river. Take a look, right? What you're saying is you think, well, if our opponent has top pair and we only value bet, they should fold every time, right? Their life is easy. Easy fold because they lose to everything. So you need to bluff sometimes. Now you may say that my opponent will literally never fold. And also we're not necessarily trying to get top pair to fold when we bet king, queen, jack. We're trying to get a 9 to fold or pocket 10s to fold, right? If the spades miss, would you have bluffed with your suited aces? I would not have bluffed all of my suited aces because we would have had too many. But the nice thing about ace high is that it actually wins at the showdown sometimes. So I would probably end up bluffing with queen jack here. And notice it's not like I even have a ton of suited aces. Like say the river was a blank 2 instead. We would just have 3 additional combinations here, right? So we'd have 3 additional combinations of bluffs. So it's not actually all that many. And also king jack could perhaps be good enough to value bet at that point. So we could probably bet with our whole range on most rivers, or the majority of our range on most rivers. So anyway, that's the answer. This is very much how I would play it. I would not really change anything. A few of you said you want to take a look at GTO solution. This is what preflop GTO solution looks like. I'm sorry, so this is what we 3-bet with preflop, these hands in red and green. This is Pio Solver for those who have never experimented with it. And essentially, it's saying to 3-bet all these hands in the proportion that they are selected. You see, like ace-8 suited, it's 3-betting it 50% of the time or so. The gray means it's not in the range. Kind of like the white on mine is not in the range, gray is not in the range. So this is a situation where, notice it's 3-betting a pretty good amount of the time, right? If we go back over to rough GTO solution, you see we're using stuff like queen 8 suited, jack 8 suited, king 6 suited. Oops, that's not what I need. And that actually lines up with what is here, right? Which is good. And again, the implementable GTO charts are not perfect GTO charts, but it's more like we take all the king 7 suited and put it into king 6 suited, right? Take all the ace 6 suited, put it with ace 5 suited. And then it allows you to play in a much more implementable manner. And take a look at what we have here. Even though I already told you we're playing tighter and the various reasons for playing tighter, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 suited aces here that is 3-betting 50-ish% of the time. We are 3-betting, 3 of those. So roughly the same, right? So we're 3-betting a little bit more ace-x suited, but a little bit less king-x suited, which is fine. It evens out, right? Look at all these offsuit hands. It's 3-betting, well, probably a little bit more. Well, I guess, so the thing is right here, like ace, queen, ace, jack, ace, 10 are very minimal, like 10% of the time or something. And king, queen, king, jack, queen, 10, also happening like 30% of the time. So we should have 1 king high. We should have queen, jack, and then maybe like an ace high. And we do have one. We have the ace 10, right? So you see how all of that lines up pretty nicely, which is how we develop the implementable GTO charts. Notice here, like jacks and 10s and 9s are not 3-bet all the time. And I remember I told you I want to be a little bit tighter. So if we added up the jacks, 10s, and 9s, it may come out to, like 140% total, but we're just doing the jacks. So anyway, this is it. Daniel said, sorry, you missed this. What position are we 3-betting from? In this scenario, low jack raised, we are 3-betting the button with this strategy I have outlined on the right. And I want to show you all that it is, roughly the GTO strategy. On the flop. Sorry. Okay, on the flop, here we have. Now we're betting the hands in red. We're checking the hands in green. I should sue for rights for simplified GTO. Not a bad idea. Let's see. So is this one of the aspects about poker coaching that you like? It makes the strategy implementable and easy. Well, yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. We're not. I mean, look, I realize this is kind of confusing. So if you take a look at this, the hands in red are hands we should be betting small with, and hands in green are the hands we should be checking. Now you see a lot of the hands are split, right? So with aces, it wants you to bet 86% of the time and check it 13% of the time, which clearly is very difficult for humans to do. So in situations like this, you're going to find that whenever the vast majority of your range is bet, just bet everything. Bet everything small and you'll be fine. Like in this scenario, I don't know what the exact number is. I could have had it on the screen, but I didn't. You're probably betting like 90% of your range or something like that. And if you're betting 90% of your range, you can get away with just betting all of it. That's A-okay. Okay, going to the turn. This is where my strategy starts to differ from the opponent's strategy. Why is ace-10 suited never betting? Because it never 3-bets ace-10 suited preflop. All the hands in gray were either called or folded preflop. Remember, if a hand is not selected, like over here, the hands in white, these are not in the range. Over here, hands in gray are not in the range. That means they are never 3-betting ace-10 suited preflop. They're never 3-betting queen-jack suited preflop. They're never 3-betting pocket 7s preflop. Because it's not good. It's definitively not a good play. If ace-9 was in our hand instead of ace-10 here, would we consider that a premium made hand? Yeah, it's good enough to bet the flop, that's for sure, and then we'd go from there. So yeah, bet the flop, and then it'd probably get checked on the turn, or would get checked on the turn. All right, so here we have it on the turn. Let's take a look at this. This is where tournament strategy across the board is going to differ from GTO strategy. Anytime you lose a significant amount of your range advantage, or just equities get closer because your opponent check called your flop, whereas you still have your whole range, which is what happened here. Because our opponent folded out their bottom 25% of their junk on the flop, right? Whereas we still have our bottom 25% of junk. When that happens, you typically want to be doing more checking. This is why you'll see me checking behind on the flop on coordinated boards a little bit more than the solver will suggest. You'll see me here checking behind a little bit more than the solver will suggest. Right here, it's probably checking behind like 25 or 30% of the time. And I'm checking behind 45% of the time, right? So that's generally what I think is quite nice. And you see the ranges are just up a little bit. All the other proportions are pretty nice. And this is good. This is nice. So let's take a look and see what differences we have here. Notice we're always betting our top pair king jack. We're always betting our queen jack as bluffs. Notice they're always betting their queen jack as bluffs, right? That's nice to see. King 8 suited, if they have it, well, king 7 and king 6 get checked a decent chunk of the time, and we are checking, so that's good. Interestingly, they're betting all ace 8, ace 7, ace 6, ace 5 for just like straight ace high, which is interesting. Like, where are their junk give-ups? So their junk give-ups here are her hands that are not even really in my range, like queen 10 suited, queen 8 suited they check sometimes, 10-8 suited they check sometimes. Like, they have ace queen in their range that's checking. So that does make some sense. So essentially they're just using some of these suited hands as potential bluffs, and that makes, or suited hands that just have ace high as a bluff, because ace 7 is probably not good, right? So that makes some sense. Worth noting, slow playing pocket kings sometimes, which is definitely interesting. In order to protect your checking range, slow playing is relevant. And I want to make it really, really clear that you do need to slow play sometimes if you are trying to play perfect GTO poker. And as an exploitative play, you need to be checking behind here with really good hands, because it's tough for your opponent to call a turn in river bet. Whereas if they bet the river, because they think they have the best hand, they may now call a river raise. Or they may just bluff the river. King X offsuit, checking King X offsuit a lot. They're not ever checking King X offsuit. King X offsuit gets bet because these are the good king highs, right? These are the best hands for top pair. Remember, the board is 9, 5, 3, king. So kings are top pairs now. Yeah, so as part of a GTO solution, you're going to find that there is almost always some slow playing going on. And that's just because if you're not slow playing, it means whenever you check, your range is in very bad shape. Also notice here, if it does have pocket nines, it's checking it every time, which is kind of neat. And that's, again, because what can the opponent have? It's hard for the opponent to have much of anything. Which we do if we check the terms of the hands in green, the opponent bets on the river. Raise kings, raise nines, call queens, jacks, tens, call kings, fold ace 4 for sure, fold ace 7, fold ace queen, fold 7-6, fold 10-8, right? It's obvious, right? And you're going to find that the very nice thing about looking through this is that it's often obvious what you want to be doing. David says ace 4 makes the wheel. That was not the question. The question was, if we check behind with these hands on the turn, and the river is a hand that doesn't make you the nuts, obviously, what do we do? We're not thinking, oh, what are we doing exactly at 2? Some mindset, like a mindset issue a lot of you have to get out of, is thinking, what happens this time? You want to be thinking what happens across the board. Doten again, so you're saying to protect the checking range, why not check behind aces? Because aces is worse than kings on 9-5-3 king. Also, queens and jacks, if you bet and get called, you're not loving it anymore. Queens and jacks on 9-5-3 king is now a very clear marginal hand, like I have selected right here, right? Very marginal hands. Under pairs are marginal. You meant on the flop. Well, let's go back to the flop. On the flop, you don't check anything. And if you are going to check it, they do happen to check the pocket aces, right? That's the one that needs the least amount of protection. But we were not on the flop. This is flop right here. We were on turn. Okay? Orange is bet, green is check. What does the height represent? The height represents what percentage of that hand is in your range to start with. So, for example, ace queen suited, right? Pre-flop. It's saying we're calling half of the time and 3-betting half the time. Ace queen offsuit, we're 3-betting maybe like, I don't know, 15% of the time, right? Ace 9 offsuit, we're 3-betting maybe 75% of the time or something like that. So I realize this is all a little bit foreign to most of you, but some of you had said that you want to make sure you're at least looking at the GTO solution. So here, we're going to start doing it. Assuming you think it's valuable. If I get a bunch of you emailing me in and say this is a waste of time, then let me know. But essentially, what I did here is I went through and I did the homework challenge. Okay, I did it without looking at the solver or anything. And then we go back to confirm that it looks at least like okay, right? And if it's way off, we need to have a reason for it being way off. And I'm already telling you, for example, my preflop ranges are a little bit tighter because we don't want to be pushing all the thin edges, right? Which makes sense. Also, I'm telling you, my turn strategy is tighter. Notice their turn strategy has them betting like 70% of the time, whereas I'm only betting 55% of the time, right? Purposefully, because you really don't want to be losing big pots in tournaments, because if you bet the turn, we're very easily on the hook for a lot of our money. Bill says, looking at these solutions helps you think. It should help you think, but at the same time, I don't want you all to look at this and just start being confused and disgruntled, because I know that's what happens. That's why a lot of you found me in the first place. Because you went to other trading sites and they just show you a load of these. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? And then maybe you just blindly followed them and you started losing money because you weren't taking the fact that you're playing a tournament into account. We are playing tournament poker here. Why ace-10 offsuit and not ace-10 suited? Because ace-10 suited flops way better. All these hands up here flop great. You don't really want to be 3-betting them. Because if you 3-bet ace-10 suited and get 4-bet, you have to fold, which is terrible. Whereas if you 3-bet ace-10 offsuit or ace-9 offsuit and get 4-bet, you can fold and it's okay. Should be betting more rather than slow playing in micro stakes. I mean, we're not really slow playing anything here. Notice the hands that are getting slow played are exactly pocket kings. 3 combinations of hands and pocket 9s, which is barely in your range. So you're really only slow playing 3 combinations of hands out of, I don't know how many, like 75 hands. So for simplicity, again, I would just be betting it. Yes, it does result in you perhaps being a little bit more unprotected. But notice, think about what I just said, right? I said I like checking behind on the turn more because it makes your river scenarios easy, right? And it also makes it to where you're not just all in a lot. So when I am betting, my range is just straight up more polarized, which means also that my checking range is better protected because it has a lot of marginal hands that can easily call a river bet. All right. You think PO is mostly betting because the turn is the king, and the strategy would be checking more on low card turns. It would definitely check more on low card turns. Chris, I was going to address this when I got to your question. But essentially, the king is great enough for our range to the point that we get to continue bluffing a decent amount of the time. That's what it amounts to. The king is quite good. And notice that, like, even in my, call it natural breakdown, we're still betting a decent chunk of the time. It's not like never. Like I said, they're betting, 70% or 75%, whereas we're betting 55%. So it's less, but it's not significantly less. And also remember, we're playing a tournament where you don't want to go broke when you happen to run into it. And whenever you're making all these thin bluffs, like Jack 8 suited, right? Jack 8 suited and Queen Jack and Ace 10, whenever you're just running triple barrels in these spots, it ends up getting you in trouble sometimes because on the river too, notice, if you have Ace Queen, you're bluffing. If you have Ace Jack, you're bluffing. If you have Ace 10, you're bluffing sometimes with a spade. If you have Queen Jack, you're bluffing, right? Notice us bluffing some of these Ace X even without spade, like Ace 7 suited without a spade. So recognize that you don't really want to be doing this in tournaments because one failure in tournaments at this point, we are jamming the all in, by the way, on the river. There's only one bet size. When we do bet the river, we're all in, and we really just don't want to be frequently running triple barrel bluffs. And a nice way to fix that is to just check behind a little bit more often in spots where ranges are a little bit closer. Why aren't low suited connectors used as a 3-bet bluff? Is it because we're kind of low stacked? Typically, we want to be 3-betting hands that are on the cusp of playability, and those hands are not on the cusp of playability. That's what it amounts to. You should be calling some of your low suited connectors, like right here. I mean, I already have the strategy outlined for you. This is roughly GTO strategy. We would rather have high blocker cards as we get shallower stacked, is I suppose what it amounts to. Anyway, on the river, here we go. Should you play your hand differently in cash games? You should just play closer to GTO most likely, unless you're exploiting something the player pool does wrong. Anyway, on the river, take a look. It's betting a king and better. King Jack bets. King 9 bets. Interesting, King 5, King 7, King 6 are betting. Well, King 5 is two pair, I guess. These seem a little bit thin to me, but fine. And then it's checking the marginal made hands that are left in its range. And that's it. Now, one thing you will notice here is that the solver is checking more on the river than I am. And why is that? Take a second, figure it out. It's because we got to the river with a stronger range than the solver did, because the solver bluffed more on the turn. So the fact that the solver bluffed more on the turn results in them getting to the river with a weaker range. We, on the other hand, got to the river with a stronger range, which is going to lead to us betting more. In terms of betting queens and jacks, those are essentially the same hand. Solver bets those sometimes for value, right? Even bets pocket tens every once in a while when it has it. And yeah, notice that it thinks ace nine is just a very clear marginal made type hand. There's no real other nines in its range. I guess queen nine and jack nine always get checked. So that's it. Is it not easier to get called on the turn versus the river for value? Well, the problem is, again, we are not trying to play big pots. And when you make the pot bigger on previous betting rounds, you make the pot bigger, which is not really where you want to be. You don't want the pot to be big when you get to the river unless you are in decent shape. And, take a look at the range that I'm betting on the flop, the turn, and the river. Like ace king is the worst hand, right? We're going to be in decent shape. Or I guess king jack's the worst hand. We're going to be in decent shape. And then our bluff has even a gut shot, right? So anyway, I made my answer. Turns out the solver gives roughly the exact same thing. And that's it. Solver bluff more discrete combos, not necessarily more total hands. It's betting more on the turn than I am. I mean, you can just straight up go through and look at it, right? Like it's betting random jack 8 suited, queen 8 suited. And yes, I agree. It may not be... The hands are more distributed because it's not trying to be implementable. It doesn't care about being implementable. But I'm pretty sure it's just going to be betting more frequently. And that's taking... It's just betting more often because of the range advantage. That's what it amounts to. So anyway, that's that. I think this is a spot that gave some of you trouble because you got to the river and you just didn't have any bluffs, which is a big problem. Some of you just started with wrong ranges pre-flop, which leads to weird flop turn river spots. But good. I'm glad you all are saying that you like this and you thought it was very helpful. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Little. I hope you're enjoying this Thanksgiving Day marathon. I hope you just enjoyed going through one of my homework challenges. And I realize that these may seem a little bit in-depth to you, but if you go back to the very earliest homework challenges at PokerCoaching.com, they will get you up to speed. There is a bit of a learning curve when it comes to thinking in terms of hand ranges. And that's why most people aren't very good at poker. They are thinking, how do I play my pocket jacks in this scenario? Or even if they start thinking about hand ranges pre-flop, by the time they get to the river, they're often completely lost. Like, for example, they'll say, well, my opponent could have the 7-4 suited that makes a straight, without realizing that they would, let's say, always bet 7-4 on the flop, or not even play 7-4 suited pre-flop, right? And it's important to understand how ranges interact and how to play your range accordingly, right? Because if you know how to play not just your hand, but your whole range, every time you study any specific scenario, it will go a long way to improving your skills because you learn how to play all the hands, which for most people, it's most enlightening to see how they play the bad hands because the bad hands, the marginal hands, right? All the hands here in green are the ones that often give players fits. And you learn how to balance the range. Being balanced is important. And once you know what a balanced strategy is, you can adjust to take advantage of whatever your opponents throw at you. So that is just one of the many benefits of PokerCoaching.com. We have over 40 challenge webinars, and I make a live webinar every single month where I go through and review some of the students' answers and discuss how I would play the scenario. And sometimes I discuss a few ways to play the scenario based on usually the opponent's tendencies. So that's all part of PokerCoaching.com. Head over right now to PokerCoaching.com/Black Friday to get an exclusive Black Friday discount.